let's compare Cursor with the official Claude AI website, and let's see which one is better. Sure, Cursor is VS Code, it offers a lot more than what Claude AI offers in that regard, such as Copilot++, Composer, and other features that are meant for that IDE experience, while Claude AI is just an interface to talk with models. However, ultimately, the chat is the most important feature. If you're developing basic JavaScript or Python projects, I guess it will work wonders, but the moment you start working with lesser known languages/libraries, or with complex concepts, or with more nuanced code, the limitations of these third-party integrations may become apparent. So for this test, what I'm going to focus on, obviously, is the chat. So what I'm going to do is feed both AIs with external documentation. So with Cursor, I'm going to use the docs feature. And with Claude AI, I'm going to use their projects feature, where I download the documentation, compress it into markdown files, and then upload them. So for this, I'm going to be feeding effect schema documentation. So here, if I type in add effect, I have this indexed. So I have basic usage, classes or messages, etc. And all of this is from this website right here, effect, and the schema section in its entirety. Now, I tried adding this whole section as one documentation so that Cursor can selectively decide which pages to use depending on my query, but it just doesn't work. It doesn't index anything and it fails. So I had to take each site, so introduction, getting started, basic usage, and add one by one. So that's why I have all of these separately. Okay, so let's start with the first test. Now, since effect schema is a validation library, I'll give a super basic prompt, and I'll copy the code here from both results from Cursor and Claude and see what we get. So for this one, I'll just use basic usage, then intro, and then getting started. And here I'll say I need a schema for an object or for a to-do object with content string, ID string, and then done, which is a boolean. And I'll copy this prompt. And we get back this code. And now I'll add it here. So same prompt, and let's see what we get back. Okay, so now let's test it too. So I'll come here to Cursor's result, and right off the bat we get some type errors. Struct does not exist, the string does not exist, and boolean does not exist. And why? Because it is in capital letter, so they are capitalized. So struct, then string, and then boolean. And say Copilot++ did this right, even the learn effect. But let's copy this one. So type to do is schema.to, which is not right. And it isn't schema.schema either. It is actually schema.schema.type. So now let's come back here to Claude AI's result, and let's copy this and paste it here, and it works right off the bat. So I guess bonus points for Claude AI. Now let's move to the second part, which is this one. So we get type inference, well, that didn't work, but we get decoding, parsing, and validating input. So let's copy this, paste it here, no type errors, and this looks right, and in fact this will work, so no issues. And what about Claude? Let's copy this, paste it here, and that looks okay. So as we can see, this will pass, this will fail because ID is a number, not a string, and it got this right. So Claude AI did a better job. It got absolutely everything right. So for now, Claude AI is winning. So now let's move on to the second test, which is harder. So what I want is, we have a string like this, or potentially a string like this, where we have width, and then we have 100, and then we have a comma, and then we have height, and then we have another number. So what I want to do is define a schema that is going to take a string with this structure, potentially, because the validation can fail, obviously, and transform this into an object. So we want width and height like this. if it succeeds, of course. Okay, so I've written the prompt. I have a string with potentially this format. I need a schema that is going to try and retrieve the width and height and transform it into this structure. So an object with width that is a number, which cannot be not a number, and same for height. And then we need to support encoding as well. So let's see what we get back. So for this, I'm feeding it basic usage, getting started, introduction, and then transformations, which is everything that you need. Okay, so now we can try this with Claude AI. So I'll copy this prompt and let's see what we get back. Okay, so now let's test the two. So I'll come here, copy this one first from cursor, and right off the bat we get a type error, and that is we get type option of string comma number, or an option of string comma an option of number is not assignable to, well, this type right here. And we also get one here, property is none, does not exist on type. And why? Well, because it is using number from effect. So honestly, I'm not sure why it's using option for this. So it returns a tuple where the sum value is a string, comma, a number. So with this, it takes in from a string, gets the pairs, so splits by comma, then invokes parse key value for each one, then constructs an object, so a record of string and number, by doing a flat map from option to array, and then if it is not present, defaults to not a number. So the only thing that it got right from this is perhaps this part right here and the encode. It is missing an as constant strict true, but other than that, looks good to me. But this decode looks terrible. And then for usage, does the same, decode and encode, decodes this, encodes this, and this gives back a template literal, or well, rather a string. So now let's take a look at Claude's to see if it maybe works. So I'll just copy this, come here, paste it here, and right off the bat we get some type errors. So the first one is this module is not exported from here. So I believe this comes here, parse result, and all errors went away. So let's see what it is doing. Created a parse string function. It is split by parts, then got the width, the height, and then if they are present, because they can be undefined, then it coerces it over to a number, otherwise returns undefined. And then to encode the string, it takes in the object, which is right here, and uses that when encoding. Now, this is not ideal because you need to synchronize both types, this one and this one, but I guess it works. Then it parses the string, checks if parsed and if not a number width and not a number height, then succeeds with parsed, otherwise fails. So as we can see, it is doing the validation within the decode function. So it is using transform or fail instead of transform. Now in some cases this is necessary, but I did ask it to use transform because I believe it is cleaner, as this will transform it automatically since it isn't a type schema. But again, it works at least better than cursors. And then to decode and encode, does the same, then run promise each one, and then logs the values and the errors, and then the encoding. So let's see if this works. So bun index.ts, and as we can see, we got the width. So this one is successful. So width and height. Then we get an error here for the invalid one, I suppose this one. And then for encoding back, we get this string in its original form. So it works. Again, another point for Claude. Okay, so let's try some follow-up instructions. So this is my solution. So what I did was define a from schema using template literal. I defined this structure, and then the to schema is the object. And what I do instead is do a number from string and then compose that with not a number. That way we can prevent validating anything within the decode function. All we need to do value is split and we're good to go. Now we need to use the non-knowledge assertion operator because even though we know that this is a template literal, TypeScript isn't powerful enough. So we need to assert this. And also for the encode, well, I just did it in line with an asConst with a strict true, and we're good to go. So let's see if we can make Claude and Cursor do something along these lines. So let's start with Claude. I wrote this prompt. You can pause the video and read it, or I'll just send it. And now he defined the template literal, and well, it simplified it a little. So he just did the with and the colon, while I did these two separately, which doesn't make sense now that I think about it. And then number from string. So this is fine because it is going to validate it as a first step, but we know that template literals are strings. So I wouldn't do that within that step. I'll just do it here. And then the code. So this structures this right away, returns the width and height, and then for encode, same as I'm doing without a strict, but that's okay. And then usage. So let's copy this, paste it here, and now we're getting some errors. First one, it is just piping it through, but we need to compose it. So we need to say schema.compose with this schema. And then here in the decode, let's see if it's maybe because of strict. Okay, this works. But if I say true, should fail because this is possibly undefined. So if we assert this and then do asConst here, works. And then before fixing this and running this, I'll copy this and try it here. So we did the same and it composed it here. So it got it right. Then it destructured it here and then did the encode and that's it. So let's try this one. Let's see what happens. So compose with this. And now we're getting an error here. Let's see what we're getting back. We get argument of type this is not assignable to this. And well, they are incompatible. Who knows what is going on here? So I'll just say strict false. And let's run this. Let's see if this works. So run. And we get our first error, and this is because it is going to throw the errors, which is not what we want. So it is not easy to validate. So we should turn this into unknown promise and then encode unknown or just promise. And then we can remove this and say that then and do the same for the other ones. And now if I save this, clear this, run this, we're still getting an error here, and that's from schema to unsupported template literal. So maybe it's because of the number from string. So if we just say string and then run this, it now works. And we get width and height, we get a parse error, and we get another one here. So two errors. Let's see what's going on here. So this succeeds. Then the encode failed, or so it seems, and then this failed. Although I may be wrong, we have width and height. So let's change this to just use either, and then we can format this better. We add some new lines, and let's see if this works. So we get a couple of errors. So the first one failed. So as we can see, shouldn't fail. This is right. So we get expected number from string actual I. And then for the second one where we encode it, it works just fine. And then the third one is invalid. So now we can see that, of course, this is not going to work. We need to split it, so it is going to fail. Now let's try this one. So I'll copy this, paste it here, and then we're getting some type errors here. Again, because of strict, let's just say false. And then we know that this is not going to work, so we need to change it over to a string. And then the decode, this is fine, and then we can do this. And if we save this, clear this and run this, we're getting an error here. Expected number from string actual W. And that makes sense. Why? Because it is destructuring it like this. So decoding will always fail. And the encoding, well, this one is pretty basic. Just this, taking the width and height. So these ones are obviously going to work. So neither Cursor nor Claude could get it right. Okay, so now to wrap this up, one last test using the core of effect. How can I create a simple pop sub to using React? I suppose a wrapper hook that has a use effect and returns a cleanup function to unsubscribe, or rather terminate the fiber. So let's see what cursor does. So we get a hub from effect. Does that exist? We create an unbounded hub, then publish is hub.publish, and then unsubscribe, or rather subscribe, stream.from hub, then message hub, and then retry exponentially every second, and then creates a default runtime, gets the fiber by doing a run fork, then subscribing to the pub sub, and then effect.tab for reach message, and then run this forever, and then interrupt the fiber. So let's copy this. So as we can see, we get quite some errors. One, hub does not exist, and thus from hub does not exist. Then the default runtime is effectful, I suppose, not a function. And we get some type errors here, and then effect.interrupt is not callable. And this is actually fiber.interrupt. So far from getting the right answer. Let's see if Claude gets it right. So let's take a quick glance. Uses popsub.unbounded, and then it yields popsub.subscribe to the popsub, and then does a stream.from queue, and this is the queue actually, and then pipe, then taps each message and sets the message to state, and then stream.run drain. So it got this right, and then run fork and effect.interrupt, and run fork returns a fiber, but effect.interrupt does not exist, it's fiber.interrupt. So let's copy this. So we're getting a couple of errors. First of all, this is fiber, not effect.interrupt, and then we get scope is not assignable to never because it expects no requirements, scope being 1. So this should be scoped, and then it tries to subscribe to an effectful pub sub creator, because this is not created. This is just an effect that would succeed with the pub sub. So this should be run sync. But as we can see, it was way closer than cursors. Cursors started hallucinating left and right. Claude at the very least got what? 3, 4, maybe 5 mistakes, and they were minor. So what is my conclusion? What would I use? Well, to be honest, I would stick with Claude. Cursor obviously has the composer feature, the Copilot++, being able to edit using this button here, the integrated chat, but unless I were to stick with the basics of every language or work with really mainstream technologies, maybe if I just used Python with, I don't know, Django, then Cursor would suffice. But since that isn't the case, and I can't rely on Cursor's indexing, which is subpar compared to Claude's indexing, then I would stick to Claude. So for the time being, I'll stick to Super Maven with Claude. So this now wraps up the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. See ya.